O positive. What? I was talking with somebody else again today, and I told them, now I believe we're at 11 exposures since this has began. I mean, like close proximity exposures. One guy, and this is last year, he's helping me lift up a giant buck with no horns. Didn't have anything to grab a hold of. Trying to get it up in the air to where I could process it. And we're both bear hugging this sucker. We're dang near nose to nose. And 2 days later, maybe 3 days later, I'm sitting at his house when he gets the call that tells him he's positive. And that was probably COVID exposure number one. I really don't remember, but every time I have a known COVID exposure, I'll go get a test. And I believe we're at 11 exposures, and I'm still negative because I'm a negative person. Don't get me wrong, I'm still recovering from that non-COVID flu upper respiratory thing that had me in the fetal position 2 weekends ago. But don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, okay? But I was talking with a healthcare worker today about it, and they asked me, well, what's your blood type? And I said, you know, you're not the first person to ask that while discussing all of this. I'm O positive, okay? Now, being O positive, or O negative for that matter, kind of puts you off in a ball game all by yourself. And there's a bunch of people that are O positive and O negatives. But, you know, we're not A or B or AB. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of the population of the world is an A, a B, or an AB. All right. Now, there's a large population is an O, positive or negative, but not near as many as there are of A's and B's and AB's, positives and negatives, you know, to their own right. But this healthcare worker tells me they're O negative, and they're now saying that if you have O positive or O blood, you're less susceptible to getting the COVID virus. And I was like, I'm a superior human being. And we also discussed the copper, and they remembered, and you may remember too, way back in the beginning, they were talking about how long the virus can live on certain substances at room temperature. And I don't remember what room temperature was. I think it was 69 degrees or something like that. And let me tell you, there's some days when I wish that room temperature in my house was 69 degrees. But my poor wife would probably freeze to death. And so anyhow, some of the things that I remember about that, and I don't have the printout anymore, I used to, but stainless steel, and there's different levels of stainless steel, different grades, I should say. Food service stainless steel, bacteria cannot grow on. That's why they use it for food service. But it's also one of the substrates that the COVID virus will live on the longest, which is several hours. And if I remember correctly, it was more than a day. But I do also remember them saying that copper was one of the the metals that it could live on the least amount of time. And I remember them discussing during all this, you know, it's been decades ago when we stopped using copper in the plumbing in our homes, probably because of the expense, and people went to PVC and CPVC plastics, and now the big thing is PEX. And don't get me wrong, if I'm going to do some plumbing, it's going to be more likely PEX. But moving away from the use of copper, and I'm sure it's because of the expense, we've opened the door to exposing ourselves to stuff. As I've mentioned before, I wear copper. I also wear bronze. Many of you have seen my wedding band. That's made out of an old Mexican peso that I made, I don't know, a little over a year ago. And, you know, bronze is copper, and, you know, it's an alloy. I also have some copper rings. I don't have one with me right now that's pure copper, or as pure as you're going to get. It's 0.999 something. AGVF, whatever, however they list that. And one of the things, you know, cheap jewelry, okay? A lot of times copper used to be used inside of cheap jewelry because it's cheaper than silver or gold, and then they would make it out of the copper, and then they'd gold plate it, or they'd silver plate it, or whatever. And that's the stuff that turns your finger green. Now my fingers don't turn that green much anymore unless I have polished the ring. But what that is that's the copper transferring into your system. Okay, copper is absorbed into your system, and you know how it comes out, I have no idea. You know, I don't know if it builds up to a certain level and then quits, or if it comes out when you go to the bathroom, or maybe when you sneeze. I have no idea. But I've been wearing copper for quite some time, so I'd say that, or in bronze, I'd say that my copper level inside my body is about as high as it's possibly going to get. You know, it also, you know, people that wear copper for arthritis and you know, joint pains and things like that, and that's the reason why I started wearing copper. But listen, folks, tested or not, vaccinated or not, if you don't feel good, don't be going to work. I ran into a guy today that tested positive for COVID, and he took, I guess, about a week off after he exposed some people, and without getting another test, without talking to anybody, he just showed back up to work. And when I was talking with him at a great distance, probably closer to 30 feet than 6, he's telling me, he says, man, I don't feel 100%. And I was like, you know, first of all, you're still sick. Take your dumb ass home and don't come back until you've been tested and you have produced a negative result and you've not had a fever for more than 24 hours. Y'all, use your head for something more than getting piercings